Hey guys, tonight, before the journey begins, please take a little time to settle down. Slowly, adjust your body into the most relaxing position. Gently soothe every tight muscle. Let your shoulders drop naturally. Relax your arms and legs. Forget the worries you have carried all day, and gently unload your exhaustion. Tonight, we will follow an ordinary woman living in the Tudor era through her day, from the cold, dark night before dawn until the last candle burns out. Here, you do not need to try to remember any details. The story will move forward bit by bit, just like your breathing, slowly, so slowly that it will gently accompany you to sleep. I hope these tranquil journeys can bring you peace, and I sincerely invite you to subscribe to this channel so that the next time you need some company at night, another gentle story will quietly come to your side. A simple tap of a like, or leaving a few words in the comments section about the city you are listening from tonight, can all help more people discover these bedtime stories. Please do not be anxious. Doing these things is all about letting nature take its course. As long as you can relax your mind, soothe your troubled emotions, and wake up full of energy tomorrow morning, we will look forward to your attention. At this moment, there is nothing that you need to worry about. All you need to do is feel this, your body temperature slowly rising, warmth wrapping around you, experiencing the night slowly settling. A long, gentle story is waiting to begin. Right now, you feel sleepiness in your eyes. Naturally, gently close them. Your breathing, rising and falling, gradually becomes steady. When you are ready, we will step into a silent house, walking into the chilly night air before the first fire is lit. Tonight, the city we are going to travel to is Tudor-era London. It is London under the rule of King Henry VIII, nearly 500 years ago. In the autumn there, the thin morning mist has not yet cleared. Michaelmas has just passed, people are settling their rent and hiring servants, and this year is also beginning to tilt towards its darker second half. We are going to spend a whole day there, an ordinary day from the break of dawn until the last flicker of candlelight deep in the night. We will stay by the side of a woman and together with her, slowly, experience the shifting of the daylight. In history, the memory of the century she lived in is still fresh. People only remembered those kings, those wars, remembered the great documents signed by important figures, and also remembered a handful of queens. We will not look at those records. What we want is to be completely unrelated to these grand narratives. What we see is an ordinary woman. She manages the household above a shop, raises her children, takes care of the business, and goes back and forth between the market and home. Every day of her life repeats these trivial matters, and when her life's curtain falls, almost no words will have recorded her. This is exactly the strange and quiet thing about her. In that era, the vast majority of women left no diaries, left no portraits, and did not even leave a certain name. Their years were as plain as flowing water, quietly behind them, gently pushing a door and silently closing it. It is exactly those ordinary days that make up the true texture of that era, those lit fires, the freshly baked bread, the mended clothes, and the children raised to grow up. Therefore, tonight, I want to take you to her side. Not to examine her from the depths of distant history, but just to quietly share the same room with her. Slowly, watching her working hands, following her footsteps, going from the slight chill of the early morning to the lingering warmth of the evening. Gently looking at how such an unadorned day is actually woven together. Meditate for a moment on how much time in life slips away in such ordinary years. Waking up in the morning, the first touch of warmth on your fingertips, gently coaxing a child to eat. The sounds of the streets you walk through, meeting familiar faces. If you pick up your own days one by one, it is exactly these trivial moments that carry the truest you. It has nothing to do with those magnificent grand events. Everything is as plain as water. It is these tiny, constantly repeating daily routines. Her day is exactly like this, truly. No one ever thought of recording it. Your silent gaze will hold an indescribable tenderness. We will not rush her. We will let the morning arrive slowly, just as it truly arrived back then. At first, the biting chill. Then, outside the window, the greyish-white morning light slowly seeping in, and in a daze, the sound of the entire house gradually waking up around her. Right now, settle your body and mind. Let the room you are in return to tranquility. Now, please join me in gazing at this darkness before the break of dawn. We are inside a quiet house in ancient London, where a woman is about to wake up from her sleep and walk towards that not yet lit fireplace. Outside, before dawn, it is the coldest moment. It is pitch black. The city streets, the river under the bridge, and even the entire sleeping city are all shrouded in gloom. The bells have not yet rung. The long night has not yet faded from the darkness. Inside the house, behind the heavy curtains, on the narrow bed, a woman yawns. Her name is Alice Cordell. At this time, there is no one around, so naturally, no one calls her name. The long night stretches on. The bed beneath her has long been warmed by her body into a cozy nest. She lies quietly, covered with thick bedding, her head resting on a soft bolster. Her husband beside her is still sleeping soundly. The sound of his breathing is long and steady, without the slightest intention of waking up, deeply sunk in his dreams. The soft pillow under her head is worth savouring in detail. If her mother saw it, she would definitely be surprised. Why would she be surprised? In the memory of the older generation, ordinary people only slept on simple straw mats laid on the ground. A round piece of wood, a cloth bag stuffed with chaff, served as a pillow. Down featherbeds are items only found in wealthy households, and mentioning them is like talking about silver tableware, full of envy. But now, Alice, as the wife of a merchant, sleeps on a down mattress, resting her head on a long down pillow, covered with a warm, clean woolen quilt. In the span of just one short generation, the comforts and enjoyments of the world have finally fallen slightly upon ordinary households. Alice has never thought about these things. She has been living this kind of life, peacefully, since birth. This subtle, soft reality still silently and quietly reveals itself, that life has already become stable and smooth. Have you ever had this kind of experience? Waking up early before the sky is bright, lying quietly in a silent room, and peacefully listening to trivial sounds. At this moment, this is exactly what Alice is doing. Outside the window, there is not a trace of daylight, and in her ears, there are only the rising and falling sounds of breathing. Deep in her heart, a thought pops up, hazy at first, then coming through clearly. It is time to get up. The room is pitch black. She cannot see her fingers when she reaches out. There is no clock, yet she can accurately sense the time. People all over the entire city are like this. Ordinary households do not have clock dials for keeping time anyway. Slowly, she relies on the sounds of bells to tell the time. The bells of the city's churches echo through the night, ringing time and time again, following the hours of prayer, the sound vibrating and resonant. Even in their sleep, people's ears have long been accustomed to carefully counting the chimes. She relies on the rooster's crow to tell the time. Before the daylight arrives, the roosters have already begun to stretch their necks and crow loudly, the sound sharp and piercing. She relies on the night watchman's shouts to tell the time. The night watchman carries a lantern, walking through the streets and alleys, unhurriedly announcing the watches, his voice melodious and drifting. The most accurate of all is still her own body. For thousands of mornings, she has woken up at this time, needing no bells to remind her. Her body's biological clock is more accurate than any clock, precise and without error. She is reluctant to leave her bed. This patch of warmth is comfortable and secure. She lies quietly for another moment, slowly gathering her thoughts, her consciousness gradually waking up, her dreams slowly drifting away, with clarity overtaking the haze. She knows exactly what is waiting for her outside the curtains, the freezing ground and the piercing cold wind. She also understands that Just like all the housewives in the city, among everyone in the entire house, she always has to be the first to face this biting chill. This hour is very slow, very unhurried, never deliberately arranged by anyone. A time alone, belonging exclusively to her. The mistress of a household always wakes up earlier than anyone else in the family. She has to light the fire to provide warmth for the whole family. She is often the first to get up in the day and also the last person to rest at night. The daytime belongs to everyone, but before dawn, this cold and dark period of time, out of habit and naturally, belongs to her alone. So, slowly and very naturally, she pulls back a corner of the curtain, and the freezing air from outside rushes into her face, gently brushing across her cheeks, making her feel a slight trace of chill. The bedroom is narrow and tightly sealed, and besides the bed, a wooden chest, and a low stool, there is nothing else in the room. The tightly closed wooden windows fit perfectly together, keeping the night outside. There is no glass on the windows, only thick wooden boards, completely blocking the darkness. Yet the cold air still seeps in thread by thread along the cracks in the board. She sits on the edge of the bed, silent and quiet, zoning out for a moment, and barefoot she steps onto the freezing floor, the chill rushing straight to the soles of her feet. If there were light, you could see the white breath she exhales, like blown smoke, condensing into white mist in the air. Just imagine the feeling of being forced to wake up early on a winter morning. That chill will first climb onto your shoulders and then drill into the back of your neck. People are half asleep, moving slowly, subconsciously reaching out to find clothing to wrap their bodies. Alice at this moment is exactly like this, in the darkness, unable to see her fingers, relying solely on touch to put on her clothes. She was already wearing a linen nightgown to sleep. This cloth garment reaches down to her ankles, and through repeated washing, its texture has long become soft. This is her nightdress, and also her close-fitting undergarment. Immediately after, she puts on her outer clothes piece by piece in a familiar order. First, pulling on knitted long stockings, fastening them tightly with laces below her knees, then putting on a petticoat to ward off the chill. Subsequently, tying on a stiff corset, pulling it tightly around her waist to support her through a whole day's hard work. And finally throwing on an overskirt, her hands, already familiar from thousands of times, swiftly tying the laces on the front. She ties on an apron, then puts on a plain linen cap, gathering all her hair inside, tying the cap strings securely under her chin, unhurried, her movements skilled and orderly. She is just like everyone else, getting dressed in the darkness of her own bedroom, mostly by habit, mostly by touch. Just by the weight of the clothes and the positions where they are placed, she can distinguish every single item. There is no mirror in the room, and she has no time to fuss over her appearance. At such an early hour, no one will be looking her over, and she does not worry about her own face. Having finished dressing, she finally feels a bit more warmth on her body. She stands up and slowly moves forward. The entire house remains immersed in deep sleep. In the room next door, the children are wrapped in their bedding, sleeping sprawled out in all directions. On the small low bed, the maid Bess is also sleeping soundly, and unless Alice calls her, she absolutely will not get up. In the corner of the shop downstairs, the apprentice is likewise sunk into dreams. Everyone in the entire house is sleeping peacefully in the dark, and she is the only one awake. She steps across the freezing room barefoot, her footsteps light, gently reaching out her hand in the dark to feel her way. She fumbles her way to the door, walks to the top of the stairs, and step by step, very carefully, slowly walks downstairs. Have you ever walked down a pitch-black staircase when the whole house was asleep, your hands sliding slowly along the walls, your feet relying on memory to step over every single stair? The wooden boards are freezing, and the surface is slightly uneven. Stepping on them, they occasionally let out a low, creaking sound. She has been listening to these sounds for almost her whole life, and has long been completely used to them. Walking down the stairs, The main hall suddenly appears before her eyes, completely pitch black and quiet, as if waiting for something. This is the core of the entire house, the hall where the family goes about their daily lives. During the day, this place is bustling with voices. Right now, in the darkness, you can only faintly make out the outlines of the long table, the benches, and the storage cabinets against the wall. At the end of the hall is the fireplace, the most important thing in the whole house, waiting there quietly for her. The fire has not completely died out. A housewife who knows how to run a home would never let the embers burn out completely. Keeping the fire over the night is a skill passed down from generation to generation. Every night when her chores are finished, she tidies up the fire, gathering the burning embers in the hearth to the center, then covering them with a layer of slightly cool ashes, smothering the embers inside to cut off the air. The coals covered by the ashes will not burn fiercely, but they will also not completely extinguish. The warm embers, buried deep beneath the ash, quietly and slowly store heat through the long night, as if falling into a deep sleep. There is even a specific word to describe this practice, and there are also bells that echo it. Around dusk, the curfew bells will ring throughout the entire city. The word curfew itself originally meant covering the fire. When the bells ring, every household in the city will bank their fires and shut their doors and windows tightly, bringing the day to a close. Now, in the darkness before dawn, what she has to do is to undo the actions taken at curfew and awaken the fire once again. She kneels in front of the fireplace, and beneath her petticoat, the freezing stone floor tiles give off a piercing chill. She picks up an iron poker and gently pushes aside the freezing ashes, searching for the embers buried a few hours ago. Faintly, the embers are still there. Deep within the ashes, the remnants are still burning, revealing a deep, hidden crimson glow, just like the faint glimmer of candlelight shining through the palm of a hand. Very carefully, she pushes the ashes aside little by little, not letting the debris scatter everywhere, and the light of the embers gradually reveals itself. Warmth rushes against her face, and compared to the piercing chill upstairs, this warmth is incomparably gentle. Next, she needs to add kindling to the embers. The night before, right before going to sleep, she prepared the kindling materials by the fireplace, just as usual. Shredded dry straw, curled birch bark, and dry firewood of varying thickness. The thinnest being no thicker than a finger. Lighting a fire has its own rules. You must start with the finest fuel and ignite it layer by layer, and she is as familiar with this process as she is with walking down the stairs in the dark. She takes out a few strands of straw, lays them on top of the embers, leans in close to the hearth, and slowly blows a breath of air. This is the oldest little magic in the world. A long and steady breath is gently sent toward the center of the embers. The crimson glow subsequently becomes brighter, gradually spreading and rising. She blows again, and after a second and third breath, the straw finally catches fire. A small cluster of faintly swaying flames slowly rises from the ashes, lively and dancing. Why not imagine for a moment that it is you leaning over to light the fire right now, facing the pitch black and freezing hearth. Just feel it, that warmth, coming along with the light. Just watching the very first glimmer of the day slowly brighten within your own breath. Then, pull your thoughts back to Alice. This morning, and this fire belonged to her in the first place, and she alone knows best how to tend to them. The flames quickly ignite the birch bark, and a faint, sweet smoke curls up into the darkness. She adds the thin firewood in order, proceeding step by step, never stuffing in too much wood all at once to smother the newborn flames. The firelight gradually brightens up, casting the shadows of the tables, chairs, and storage cabinets onto the wall, one by one, little by little, waking the whole hall from the darkness, as if the house is also slowly waking up along with the fire. Not every household can light a fire this easily. Those poor families in the city who fail to keep their embers alive through the night will have to suffer a lot more trouble in the early morning. The housewife can only take out the tinderbox, place it on her lap, and repeatedly strike the flint against the iron piece, slowly scraping and trying to make fire, taking great pains to let the sparse sparks fall onto the charred pieces of cloth. In the biting cold, it often takes a long time before the tinder can finally catch fire. Then, taking a thin wooden stick dipped in sulphur to catch the flame, only then can the hearth be lit. Alice has also experienced this kind of predicament, encountering a completely dead fire in the early morning, so she knows deeply the hardship involved. This morning, looking at the perfectly preserved embers, her heart is full of gratitude. Preserved embers are far more comforting than a freezing piece of flint. If even the flint fails to strike a light, neighbors will use the oldest method of helping one another. People will have a child carry a covered clay bowl, or sometimes an old iron pot, and walk into the streets and alleys, entering the homes where the chimneys are already smoking, to beg for a few pieces of burning coal. The child very carefully guards the embers, braving the cold wind, and brings the burning coals back home, borrowing the neighbor's fire to relight their own hearth for the day. In that street, fire is intrinsically something that neighbors borrow and share with one another. If one household loses its fire, there is always a neighbor to help, and the fire of the entire street will never completely die out. This silent kindness flows slowly between every household, and no one will grudge the few burning coals in their hands. She is still kneeling in front of the hearth, slowly adding wood and poking the fire, watching the fire gradually burn vigorously. At this moment, there is still no need to rush, as everyone in the house is still sleeping. For a short moment, this fire completely and totally belongs to her. She just quietly watches over the fire, with no other thoughts in her mind. In this darkness, she has finally found warmth. Waiting until the fire is steady and roaring, she sets out to prepare for the next task, fetching a light for illumination. From the shelf above the fireplace, she picks up a rushlight. This is made by taking rushes picked by the river, peeling them, soaking them in excess fat, and letting them dry, and it is the simplest lighting tool in ordinary households, very low in price. She brings the top of the rush close to the flames, and the wick quickly catches fire, flickering, a small cluster of steady light, and as it burns, it gives off a faint smell of grease. At such an hour, she would never waste a precious beeswax candle. Beeswax is highly priced and has always been exclusively for churches, nobles, and festivals. A single rushlight is enough to light the way forward, and that is sufficient. She secures the burning rushlight onto an iron candle holder, its faint but steady glow swaying quietly. At this moment, there are two sources of light in the hall. One is the fireplace with its broad and soft glow, and the other is the slender candlelight right beside her. The two beams of light intertwine, forcing the darkness back into the corners of the room. The city outside the house is still shrouded in the night, yet it already faintly shows signs of movement. From the distance comes the first chime of a bell, clear and long, sweeping over the freezing roofs, calling the faithful to go and perform their morning prayers. Deep in the streets and alleys, the sound of rolling wheels can be heard, exceptionally clear on the empty and quiet roads. Beyond the wooden windows, the entire city is slowly waking up, preparing to welcome a new day. Inside the house, the fire burns brighter and brighter, and the hall gradually becomes warm. Alice, wearing her soft cap and with her apron tied around her waist, stands in the firelight. She is the first person to wake up in this house, and the whole city is also slowly waking up. The morning chill is gradually fading away, and the lights have already been lit. An ordinary and trivial day of hard work is quietly waiting for her just ahead. At this moment, a wisp of pale greyish-white light quietly creeps up into the upstairs room. The light slowly seeps in along the cracks of the wooden windows, its colour like pewter, exactly the unique hue of a winter dawn. Strictly speaking, this does not yet count as what we call a true morning. But for this small courtyard household, the busyness of the day has already begun. Inside the children's bedroom, the first signs of movement are heard. A baby waking up never happens completely out of the blue. At first, it is just a slight movement under the bedding, the little body gently turning over, accompanied by a few faint and muffled sounds, not yet counting as crying. Gradually, the commotion gets louder and louder, and soon a clear, tender cry rings out, piercing the slightly chilly air. This is the most instinctive call in the world, and no mother could sleep peacefully through such a cry. Have you also ever heard the sound of a child waking up in the next room, and while your consciousness is still hazy, your body has already instinctively responded? Human instinct always recognizes this kind of sound, and Alice at this moment is exactly the same. You will see that she has put down the chores in her hands, holding up the rushlight, slowly walking upstairs, the faint firelight casting swaying shadows on the wall in front of her. The youngest child is lying in a wooden cradle by the wall. The style of the cradle is simple, with a canopy at one end to block the drafts, and two curved rockers attached to the bottom, allowing it to gently rock back and forth. Such a cradle would often accompany a household, continuously nurturing several children one after another, and over the years, under pairs of gentle hands and feet, it has been worn smooth and warm. Alice walks to the side of the cradle, leans over and looks. The little one has already woken up, tiny fists trying hard to break free from the swaddle, the little face flushed red, using all its strength to cry out loud. Babies of that time all had to be tightly wrapped up. This was the universally accepted practice of the era. Newborns would be wrapped layer by layer with long linen bands, their limbs firmly pressed against the sides of their bodies, unable to move. This is swaddling. The local people had reasons they firmly believed in for doing this. They thought that a tight wrapping could prevent the tender limbs from growing crooked, just like using a brace to secure a fragile sapling, making the child's figure straight and upright. Therefore, the swaddle was repeatedly undone and rewrapped every day, and the child was bundled up squarely, like a tightly sealed package, revealing only a tiny face. Looking at it now, this kind of restraint might be hard to understand, but hidden within it is also a unique tenderness. Tightly wrapped in linen, warm and cozy, the baby would not be startled awake by randomly waving their hands and feet. In the freezing cold seasons, inside chilly houses, a swaddle could protect a child's delicate body much better than loose bedding. Regardless of whether this method was scientific, behind it was an abundance of care. Every loop of the wrapping band carried deep affection, even though today our ways of raising children are already completely different. She picks up the baby along with the cloth bands, the tiny body pressed against her shoulder. The crying immediately and gradually stops. You can also feel that this familiar body temperature, the mother's unique scent, coupled with the slowly rocking rhythm, can always easily soothe a child. She sits down on the low stool beside the cradle and begins to nurse the child. The greyish-white daylight envelops the mother and daughter, and the room is quiet, leaving only the little one's satisfied sounds of suckling. Not long after this little life was born, it had its very own name. According to local customs, within a few days of birth, the baby would be wrapped in a cloth, a delicate linen fabric called a christening cloth, and carried to the holy water font of the parish church to be baptized and registered with a name. The matter of naming was handled by the godfather, and people also affectionately called them sponsors. The godfather took an oath for the child in front of the holy water font, called out the name, and from then on shouldered the responsibility of guarding the child's soul. They would often present christening gifts, such as a silver spoon with a holy figure carved on the handle. The child's name was mostly taken from the godparents, grandparents, or an ordinary name passed down through generations in the family. Just like this, the baby, who only knew how to cry, accompanied by a name and a guardian, arrived in this world. You must know that not all mothers in the city would nurse their children themselves. Wealthy and powerful families always favoured hiring a wet nurse, sending the child to the wet nurse's home to be cared for. Noble ladies were able to free themselves to manage other affairs, which at that time was not an embarrassing act, but rather the norm for wealthy households. The wet nurse would accompany the child through their entire early childhood, coaxing them to sleep, feeding them, and caring for them meticulously, and the child treated her almost like a birth mother. But Alice is only the wife of a merchant, not a noble lady. Like the majority of ordinary women, she can only personally nurse the child in her arms. There is no one in the house to do it for her, and she herself does not want to let anyone else do it. After feeding the child, the swaddle must be untied. She lays the baby flat, loosening the cloth bands loop by loop, letting the tiny limbs finally stretch out and kick freely in the slightly chilly air. Underneath the swaddle, there are soft old pieces of cloth laid out, used to catch the baby's waist. From a stack of clean cloth pieces warming by the fire, she takes out a new one to replace it. Her baby goes through countless diapers a day, washed and then dried, dried and then washed again. This silent and endless love is never recorded in writing, yet it is the daily life of every mother. She carefully wipes and tidies up and wraps the child up properly once again. Well fed and hydrated, dry and warm, the little one's eyelids gradually droop down, peacefully falling asleep once more. Not long after, the maid Bess, rubbing her sleepy eyes, slowly walks upstairs to step forward and help. In such an ordinary household, a young maid is just like another pair of hands for the mistress, able to chime in and help out with everything. She will rock the cradle, hold the baby, and look after the little boy Ned, letting the mistress go downstairs with peace of mind to tend to the fire. With many children in the house, chores big and small are shared together by the women of the household. The mistress and the maid pass the child between them, as naturally and skillfully as passing a loaf of bread. While the two are busy, another child also wakes up. On the low bed at the other end of the room, the 2 or 3-year-old little boy Ned sits up from his bedding, his hair a mess, blinking his sleepy eyes. He has long stopped needing to sleep in a cradle or be wrapped in a swaddle. He can now walk independently, is full of curiosity about everything around him, and like all children his age, he is lively and active. He watches his mother caring for the little baby, waiting quietly, as if knowing that it will be his turn next. Children of this age always love to take a tumble. A toddler, learning to walk, falls countless times a day, and everywhere in the house there are hard corners and freezing stone floors. Therefore, people of that time would equip their children with exclusive protective items. When Ned is toddling around, he always wears a soft padded bumper cap on his head, made of thick rolls of cloth sewn into a ring shape, like a crown, which can cushion the blow when he falls. The soft cap sits crookedly on top of his head, making him look like a childish yet serious little knight, and what is hanging around his neck is his most cherished possession. That is a red coral teething pendant, a round piece of red coral with a small silver handle inlaid at the bottom and silver bells adorning the handle, which jingle with a slight shake. Households with decent means would almost all prepare this accessory for their children, and it has 3 purposes. The hard and freezing cold coral can soothe swollen and aching gums during teething. The crisp silver bells are a child's earliest toys and music, shaking back and forth, always managing to make the child laugh. In people's beliefs, red coral also comes with its own spiritual power, able to protect young children and keep them away from disasters and malice. It is a toy, a teething stick, and also a blessing amulet. Ned cannot bear to part with it, chewing and shaking it from time to time, not willing to leave it for even a moment. Children of that time had no distinction between boys' and girls' clothing, and when Ned was younger, he also wore long dresses and petticoats just like his sister. Boys generally had to grow to 6 or 7 years old before they would change into trousers. The day they changed into trousers was considered a small joyous occasion for the whole family, symbolizing that the boy was saying goodbye to early childhood and starting to wear adult-style clothing. But this day is still a long way off for Ned. At this moment, he, like other young children, is wrapped in a small long dress to ward off the morning chill, with a coral pendant hanging around his neck and a soft bumper cap on his head. You will see that he also has a few other small toys, a childhood rattle, a small spinning top, and a long stick hobby horse. It is just that he is still too small right now to play with them properly. Toys from that era were very few and simple in style, mostly handmade. Wooden toys whittled by fathers during their free time at night, and cloth dolls sewn from scraps of fabric. Children would also play with cherry pits, sheep knuckle bones, and push iron hoops while running in the streets. But the red coral pendant adorned with silver bells is the most beloved treasure for young children, and this morning Ned is holding onto it tightly the whole time, refusing to put it down. Next, it is his turn to be fed breakfast. For young children who are not yet able to eat at the table, the staple food is a mushy porridge. Bread is boiled in milk or water until the texture is fine and smooth, like cream, making a simple meal. The warm mush is fed with a spoon or poured into a special boat-shaped eating vessel. This morning, Ned obediently opens his small mouth, eating like a little bird, and a lot of mush gets stuck on his chin and soft cap, while his mother casually helps wipe it off as she feeds him. The food is plain and ordinary, yet warm and filling, and a child who has eaten their fill is always carefree. There is also a slightly older girl in the house, and her morning has a different arrangement. The girl is named Jane, and has already reached the age to begin her education. In the corner by the window with the best light, she is sitting, holding in her hands the essential educational tool for school children of olden times, a hornbook. In that era, almost all children who learned to read relied on it to take their first step in learning. The hornbook is simple in structure, yet very ingenious. A small wooden board the size of a palm, with a handle at one end and a piece of paper pasted on the board's surface. Printed on the paper are the contents children must learn for their initial education: the complete uppercase and lowercase alphabet, a few sets of spelling phrases, and at the very bottom is the Lord's Prayer, which all children are required to read fluently and recite. Over the paper's surface, there is a layer of thin animal horn polished to be almost transparent, which protects the writing from being worn away by tender fingers without blocking the view. With this layer of protection, even if the board is repeatedly rubbed thousands of times, the words on it always remain perfectly intact and clear. The children even gave the alphabet a special name, calling it the criss-cross row, because in front of the letter A, a small cross symbol is printed. When school children recite it, they will first read out the cross mark, and then sequentially read out all the letters that follow. Just like this, the introduction to reading and the prayer scriptures are memorized together by the children on the exact same small hornbook. Jane sits by the window, her fingertips slowly moving along the letters, silently murmuring in a low voice. Countless children of the past have all done the exact same thing in the corners of their own rooms on mornings with faint daylight. For a girl, how far her path of learning can go has never been a certainty. Some girls study diligently from childhood and read extensively throughout their lives, but there are also many girls who stop right there after merely learning to recognize and read prayers and write their names, and all their remaining time is spent learning needlework and homemaking skills, which, at that time, were regarded as the foundation for a woman to settle down and establish herself. Everything entirely depends on the family's financial situation and their family's choices. But almost all children, regardless of whether they are boys or girls, will initially come into contact with this hornbook to learn the criss-cross row alphabet and prayers. In just a short morning, the nursery is full of the trivial scenes of children's daily lives. The baby is full and sleeping soundly. Ned is wearing his soft bumper cap, shaking his coral silver bells until they jingle, lively and active. Jane sits alone in the corner, softly reciting her letters. Alice shuttles back and forth among them, caring for every child that needs looking after. This is the oldest labour in the world, and also the one least recorded by written words. You see, in that era, the path of growth for infants and toddlers was full of fragility and the unknown, and not all small lives that came into the world could grow up safely. The living environment of that time was exceptionally harsh on children, and the bitterness of it need not be detailed. Every mother knew this perfectly well in her heart, and precisely because of this, they would hug the children in their arms, doubly tight. We do not need to delve deeply into this cruel reality. We just need to understand. The love flowing in this room deeply knows how precious and fragile life is. And so, every warm and ordinary morning, every small mouth that is fed full, every dry diaper, and every crisp ring of a bell is a silent and small perfection. This feeling is clearly understood by everyone, yet there is no need to speak it out loud. At this moment, the morning light gradually becomes bright, and the children are safe and sound. The baby closes its eyes and falls into a deep sleep. Ned shakes the coral pendant at the floating dust in the sunbeams, the ringing silver bells making him burst into peals of laughter. For this household full of children, the long day slowly unfolds in this gentle and busy daily routine. The front part of the house, facing the street, is the shop, and the reason the entire house is located here is exactly for this business. In that era, a craftsman's residence and workshop were originally integrated into one, under the same roof. The family lives in the backyard and upstairs, while the business of making and selling is set up in the front room facing the street, visible to all passers-by. At this moment, the doors and windows of the shop are still tightly closed, just like at nightfall. A huge hinged wooden board seals the front of the shop, separating the inside of the house from the street. But the early morning has arrived. Keeping the doors closed means no business can be done, so opening the doors to welcome customers becomes one of the top priorities every day. Have you ever seen a merchant opening up shop in the early morning when the streets are still quiet? This set of procedures, day after day, has become almost like a small ritual. First, from the inside, they pull out the door latch and then slowly lower the heavy wooden board that blocks the door. The wooden board, lowered flat along its hinges and extending outward onto the street, instantly transforms into a spacious open-air counter where the goods to be sold that day can be displayed one by one. The wooden board that was acting as a wall just a moment ago turns into a stall in the blink of an eye, and this small shop thus opens its doors to the street. In the entire street, every household is repeating the same actions, one by one. The blocking wooden boards are lowered, and the shops along the street open up one after another. Neighbours across the street say good morning to each other, and apprentices are busy arranging goods for the shop owners. The whole street gradually wakes up, and shop after shop, like open mouths in the early morning air, welcome visitors from all directions, ready to open for business. Above the counter hangs the shop sign. At that time, almost every shop had a sign, suspended in mid-air by an iron frame, swaying gently with the wind. In those days, the streets had no house numbers, and among the pedestrians there were quite a few people who could not read at all, so people relied on the pictures on the signs to identify the shops. A shoemaker's shop hung a painted tall boot, a bakery hung a sheaf of wheat, and a pawn shop used 3 round balls as its symbol. The sign of this household has an equally distinct and clear picture: a large pewter flagon, a tall flagon with a lid, suspended above the lintel. If you were in the street, asking around for the shop with the flagon sign, even a child could point you in the right direction. This is a pewter workshop. Inside, they craft silvery grey and shiny pewterware. Respectable families will use these kinds of vessels to serve food and drink wine, and will also display them on shelves to decorate their homes. And the process of making the pewter ware has already quietly begun in the workshop behind the shop, where the fire is blazing inside and the warmth is soft and continuous. Let's leave the slightly chilly street for a moment and walk into the workshop in the back. The master of the house has long been hard at work. His name is Robert Cordell, This craft has been passed down for generations, is now taken over by him, and in the future will be passed on to the next generation again. He is a pewterer, using tin and lead as raw materials to craft vessels, and in the workshop, various tools for making these wares can be seen everywhere. A small smelting furnace is burning brightly. The metal inside melts into a liquid state, and a faint, pungent smell fills the air, mixed with the scents of smoke, hot metal, and furnace ash. Pewter is not a single metal, but an alloy formed by melting multiple metals together. Among them, tin makes up the highest proportion, forming the warm and shiny main body of the pewter ware. Then an appropriate amount of lead is mixed in, making the molten metal flow better and easier to cast. Sometimes, a little copper or other raw materials are added to increase the object's hardness. The higher the quality of the vessel, the greater the proportion of tin, and the smaller the amount of other ingredients. The ratio of metals is by no means a trivial matter. The industry has strict rules regarding this. If a craftsman cuts corners on materials or carelessly mixes the raw ingredients, they will surely be punished. But for an honestly run workshop like the Cordell family's, the ratio of materials has always been fair, and the vessels they craft have a pure texture and give off a clear, pleasant ringing sound when struck. Let's take a look at the process of making a dining plate. The molten liquid metal with flowing silver light is carefully poured into a mold. These molds are quite valuable in themselves, mostly carved from bronze or brass, and the craftsman will carefully treasure them for many years. The liquid metal fills the mold, outlining the shape of a plate, a soup bowl, or a spoon, and subsequently slowly cools and solidifies after being removed from the mold. It is a rough piece with a dull color and rough edges, still needing further grinding and carving. Casting it into shape is merely the first step. The craftsman secures the rough piece on a lathe, letting it spin at high speed, and holding a cutting tool in his hand, finely shaves and grinds the surface. Shiny metal shavings curl up and fall down one after another. After that, it must be repeatedly hammered to make the body of the vessel solid and its shape more regular. Then, after being scraped and trimmed, the very last step is polishing. The originally greyish rough piece gradually radiates a soft and warm glow. Fine quality pewter ware naturally has its own unique texture, not dazzling and eye-catching like silver. Its luster is restrained and quiet, just like the sky before a rain, a hazy silvery grey. Looking back at the past, this kind of pewter ware holds a special significance. Not long ago, ordinary people still all used wooden tableware, square wooden boards as plates, and whole pieces of wood carved into cups. People collectively refer to this kind of wooden ware as treen, which is the daily utensil of poor households. On the other hand, pewter vessels are a symbol of an affluent life. Using a set of shiny pewter ware and displaying it on a shelf at home is a silent form of respectability. A thrifty and hard-working housewife will always wipe the pewter ware until it is as clean and bright as new. People often use fine sand and scouring rushes to grind and polish it. Sets of pewter ware will be neatly arranged on the sideboard for people to admire. A complete, matching set of pewter ware is an even more valuable household asset and will even be written into wills to be passed down through generations. The pewterer will craft all kinds of utensils needed by every household: flat plates and large serving platters for holding meat, flagons and storage jugs for holding wine, salt cellars, candlesticks, porridge bowls, soup spoons, and more. From dining to daily use, the large and small utensils in life can all be crafted from this warm, silvery grey metal, and at that time, countless families were all like this. In the workshop, besides the master of the house, there is another person. In the corner, a half-grown boy is leaning over, busy with the work in his hands, and he is the apprentice Will. He has signed a formal apprenticeship contract with Robert, agreeing to learn the craft for many years. At that time, the apprenticeship period was generally 7 years, and sometimes even longer. During the learning period, The apprentice eats and lives in the master's home, just like a family member, with the master providing food, clothing, and shelter. This apprenticeship contract carries a special significance. At a very young age, the boy leaves his original family and moves in under a stranger's roof. He gives his labor and obeys discipline in exchange for 3 meals a day, a place to stay, and most importantly, the exclusive skills to pass on the craft. In that era, people called a craft a secret art, and this name is perfectly fitting. The entire set of skills for casting, turning, and finishing is a solid foundation for making a living and can only be taught by the master through word of mouth and hands-on instruction, with no other way. Right now, Will is only doing some chores like sweeping, running errands, and carrying things, but year after year, he is quietly dedicating himself to learning this craft that he will rely on to make a living in the future. The heavy and rough work in the workshop is taken on by the men, but the shop facing the street is left for Alice to manage, and this point is often overlooked by formal historical records. The shop is Alice's own little world. When Robert is casting and polishing vessels in the high-temperature workshop, the person standing at the open-air counter, directly facing the coming and going customers, is her. Welcoming guests, displaying goods, quoting prices, and collecting money are all handled single-handedly by her. She knows perfectly well in her heart how much stock is in the shop and what is missing. The daily sales accounts are also tallied one by her. In the towns of that time, a craftsman's wife was often the public face of the shop, and interacting with customers, watching over the storefront, and managing small accounts were all part of their daily routine. This was the most ordinary thing in the world, and everyone was completely used to it. This job equally requires experience and skill, yet a written contract would never be drawn up for it. In the early morning street, the first customer walks over, and we might as well stand beside Alice and watch this transaction. The person who comes is a maid from a nearby household, heading out to run errands on her mistress's orders, clutching a few coins in her hand, and also holding a piece of cloth, wrapping an old piece of pewter ware. She places the item on the counter. It is a dining plate. The edge of the plate is worn thin. There is also a dent on the surface, and the mistress wants to trade it in for a new one. Alice picks up the plate, turns it over, and weighs it in her hands by the daylight, and relying on years of experience, she can see the degree of wear on the vessel at a single glance. She has long since done this kind of task thousands upon thousands of times. Here is a little piece of common knowledge about pewter ware. Pewter vessels of that time, just like cheese and iron nails, were priced by weight. The metal itself has actual value, and old used vessels would absolutely never be casually thrown away. The shopkeeper will take back the old vessel, weigh it, and convert it into a price value to deduct from the cost of a new vessel. The collected old pewter ware will be melted down again into liquid metal and cast into shape once more, the whole process making the best use of everything without the slightest bit of waste. The pewter ware, stored in every household, can also be considered a form of tangible savings. They are displayed brightly on the shelves, and whenever there is a need, they can be converted into value based on their weight. In the slightly chilly morning light, this transaction is finalized on the counter. The old plate is weighed and discounted, then a perfectly new plate is brought out, weighed, and the prices are compared. Both sides discuss the price using shillings and pence, and just like all marketplace trades, they go back and forth, haggling over small amounts, adding or subtracting a penny, until both sides are satisfied. The entire process is peaceful and unhurried, with no arguments. Having experienced countless mornings like this, Alice deeply understands the fair market price. She will neither demand an outrageous amount, nor will she ever take a loss to make a sale. Not every transaction is paid in full with cash on the spot. At that time, quite a few trades were maintained by personal relationships and trust. Regular customers can take the vessels away first, with the account recorded under their name, and wait until a designated settlement day to clear the payment. What Alice has to record is not just the goods, but also the credit accounts of the neighbours in the street. The accounts are recorded in the ledger and carved onto wooden tally sticks, clearly keeping track of the small debts of each family in the parish. Running a small shop means being deeply familiar with the names, needs, and characters of the neighbours, and managing all the accounts without a single mistake. Behind all these trades there is also a force that customers have no way of seeing, yet it controls every piece of authentic pewter ware, the guild. All the pewterers in the city belong to the same guild. This is a trade association made up of craftsmen, with an exclusive guild hall and strict rules. The guild guards the reputation of the entire industry, sets the standard ratios for metal raw materials, and also dispatches officers to conduct irregular inspections of every shop. The inspectors will randomly check the goods, and once they discover vessels with adulterated materials or substandard quality, they will confiscate them on the spot. On the bottom of every qualified piece of pewter ware, you can see an exclusive mark. Every craftsman has his own maker's mark, a small stamp carved with a unique pattern, which he personally strikes onto every vessel he crafts. This is the craftsman's signature, just like branding his name onto the metal. All makers' marks are registered in the guild hall, corresponding one by one to the craftsmen themselves. By relying on the mark, a vessel can be traced back to whose hands it came from, and the craftsman must also take responsibility for all the goods under his name. This is an ancient and honest set of rules. A single maker's mark is the credibility of a craftsman, deeply branded onto the silvery grey pewter ware, and someone who knows the trade can distinguish it at a single glance. There is also a piece of the past that historical records barely mention. We mentioned earlier that Alice manages the shop, while her husband focuses on making the vessels, but in many handicraft families, the situation went much further than this. The wives of craftsmen would often learn their husbands' skills to the point of mastery. If the master of the house unfortunately passed away, the one to take over the entire business would most likely be his widow. Behind this lies a heavy, practical significance. A widowed female shopkeeper could continue to use her late husband's craft and keep running the workshop and shop under her own name. She could retain the original apprentices and complete their apprenticeship terms, and could also recruit new apprentices. In some industries and towns, women could even formally join the guild, standing on equal footing with male craftsmen. The law also recognized married women who did business independently. They were known as independent female merchants, independently bearing all the rights and responsibilities in business, with a status equal to male operators. A situation like this, though not considered common, truly existed. Quite a few women, relying on their own strength, guarded their craft, their shops, and their personal business reputations, and established a firm foothold in the world. When you look at this street-facing counter, please don't just see Alice as a housewife, temporarily watching the shop, waiting for her husband to take over. You must know, she has long since thoroughly understood every aspect of this craft. She manages the accounts and makes the trades, and if an unexpected tragedy were to happen, she is fully capable of holding up the entire shop on her own. The fact that history books have not left her name behind does not mean she never existed. In every street and in every shop, there was a woman like this. At this moment, in this shop hanging the flagon sign, she is facing the slightly chilly morning light, carefully weighing the plate in her hands. The maid wraps the new plate back up with the cloth and carries it as she walks deep into the street. The coins drop into the cash box, and the front of the counter temporarily returns to a state of peace. In the workshop at the back, the lathe lets out a sharp and continuous hum, and the iron hammer rises and falls, its rhythm steady and orderly. Robert continues to work hard beside the high-temperature furnace fire, and Will carries items back and forth, observing and learning the craft while he works. Alice stands in front of the open-air counter. Behind her is the dim and warm workshop. In front of her is the cold and bright street, quietly waiting for the next customer to arrive. The daylight is hazy. The pewter ware in front of her gleams with a soft luster, and the sign above her head sways gently with the wind. The day's business officially raises its curtain. The shop is completely ready, and the mistress watching over it is as well. Just like in the past, on every ordinary morning, the years go on as usual, and the livelihood never ceases. Early morning time quietly slips away, and on this brief autumn day, the sunlight has already climbed to the highest point it can reach. Now, it is nearly noon. For a household, at noon, the most important thing is only one. That is eating dinner. The most hearty meal of the day is at noon, and not in the evening. They call it dinner. This is the main meal of the day. It is the meal people look forward to after working in the cold morning. The meal eaten in the evening is relatively simple and is called supper. Therefore, as noon approaches, the centre of this house also undergoes a shift. It shifts from the shop in the front to the fireside in the back. That is where the food is located. Now, let's walk into this warmth. The kitchen, if a house of this size can spare a room to serve as a kitchen, then it is absolutely the warmest place under the roof. The fire here has not been banked, but is burning very brightly to cook the food. Like most mornings, by the fireside, the person tending to it is Bess. Ever since getting the children settled down, she has been busy all along. A pot hanging over the fire has been hanging there for quite a while. Almost all families, regardless of rich or poor, daily eat a kind of food called pottage, and boiling pottage cannot be rushed. Have you ever walked into a kitchen where food has been stewing for several hours? Have you, right at the doorway, felt that burst of warmth and aroma? The kitchen right now is exactly like this. The pot hangs on an iron hook above the flames, and the iron hook connects to a crossbar embedded in the chimney. This way, the pot can be pushed in to be heated or pulled out, away from the heat source. Inside the pot, the thick and savoury food is slowly tumbling, giving off bursts of hot steam. Pottage is an ordinary and daily miracle on the English family dining table. In essence, it is a rich soup, or you could say a mushy stew. Whatever the family has is used to make it. It uses oats, barley, or dried peas and dried beans as a base to make it thick. Inside, they also add potted herbs, onions, and leeks bought from the garden or the market, as well as the green leaves of colewort that was the ancient cabbage of the time. Perhaps they will also put in a small piece of bacon, a bone, or a bit of salted meat to enhance the flavour. All these ingredients are thrown into the pot together and slowly stewed over a low fire for a long time until they become soft, thick, and delicious. At that time, in the entire era, this was the food that most frequently fed the most people. Poor families might only have grain and herbs to boil a pot of thin green pottage paired with a piece of bread. And families with better conditions, just like this household, will put more ingredients into the pot and eat a thicker, heartier meal. But regardless of rich or poor, this pot is always the centre of the kitchen. It is always boiling, constantly being added to and watched over. It is the truest hearth in an English family. Boiling with a pot is not the only way to cook, but it is the way for the vast majority of people. In the kitchens of high officials and noblemen, meat turns on a roasting spit in front of the fire, roasted to a golden brown, dripping with grease. A boy, sweating profusely, sits there, constantly turning the spit. That is the way of cooking for banquets and wealthy families on their dining tables. Ordinary families rarely roast meat. This requires a roaring fire, constant and careful watching, and enough meat to make it worth doing. But that pot of delicious pottage needs almost no looking after and can slowly boil. It can feed a working family much better at a much lower cost. Most of the time, in most families, the thing being tended to is always that pot, while the roasting spit is left idle in the corner. Bess is now using a long wooden spoon. Stirring the pot, she scoops the food up from the bottom to prevent it from sticking to the pot and burning. Adding a little ingredient from this earthen jar and then grabbing a handful of something from over there and putting it in. When it comes to doing this, she is no novice at all. A servant girl learns to cook through year after year of practice by the side of older women. Tending well to a pot of soup is a true skill, and she has mastered this skill. So, what food is eaten along with the pottage? Naturally, it is bread. Bread is the other half of daily life. It is the absolutely essential thing on all dining tables. But bread is not all the same. Just like pewter is not all of one quality either. The bread you eat can clearly state what kind of family you come from. The highest grade of bread is white, made from finely sifted wheat, light white in colour, soft and delicate. They call the best among them manche, that is, the bread eaten by the rich and the nobles. The next grade down is the bread eaten by the middle class, baked with a mixture of wheat and rye. It is a bread with a darker colour and a more solid texture. And the poorest people eat the coarsest bread, dark in colour and dense in texture. It is made of rye or barley, or during hard years, made from whatever the cheapest grain is. A piece of bread is just like a map of a family's social status in this world. Most townspeople do not bake bread themselves. Baking bread is just like any other trade. It is a craft, and most people buy their bread from the baker on the street corner. Furthermore, the bakers are supervised just as strictly as the pewterers. There is a law regarding bread, an ancient, famous law called the assize of bread. According to this law, the weight of the bread is fixed according to the price of grain. When wheat is expensive, the bread gets smaller, but a 1 penny loaf of bread always sells for 1 penny. Therefore, the size of the bread increases and decreases with the changes in the harvest set by the law. This way, no baker can cheat the poor on bread. If caught giving short weight, the baker would be publicly humiliated in the street. So, in this household, there is fresh bread bought from outside, already laid out on the dining table, ready to go. There is also a drink to go with the meal, and that drink is ale. Here is one thing that sounds very strange to us. Under normal circumstances, they do not drink water. The water in crowded towns is unreliable, and people also know this, even though they are not quite clear on the reason why. Almost from the cradle to the grave, the everyday drink of the English people is all ale. Ale brewed for everyday drinking is brewed very weak and is called small ale. Its strength is very low, so even children can drink it. And everyone drinks it at every meal. Ale is an ancient English thing brewed from malted grain, and it cannot be kept for too long. It needs to be drunk fresh right after brewing, usually finished within a week. When it comes to brewing ale, women have for a long time held the dominant position. According to old customs, brewing, cast, is women's work. The alewife brews ale at home. Whatever her own family cannot finish drinking, she will take out to sell. She will hang a bush of branches or a wooden pole on the door to indicate that there is fresh ale for sale inside. This is one of the ancient ways women in the past could earn a little pocket money. Right in these years, a change is quietly taking place. A new kind of drink is spreading over from the Low Countries. It is called beer. Beer is brewed using hops, which is a kind of bitter-tasting, green flower that ale has never used. And hops have played a magical role. They can prevent the drink from spoiling, therefore beer can be brewed in large quantities and stored for months. Some people are still complaining about this newly emerged bitter taste, and they insist on drinking authentic ale. But the era of beer is arriving and will ultimately win a great victory. However, for the time being, in a household like this, what fills the cups is most likely still traditional ale. Besides pottage and bread, a household like this has some other plain delicacies on hand. There is cheese and butter just churned out from the butter churn, placed in a cool spot ready for use. When the hens are laying, there will also be some eggs. It is autumn now, and there are apples, carefully stored in a dry and dark place to prepare for winter. None of these things are considered luxurious, but they fill the dining table. A family that possesses pottage, bread, ale, cheese, and apples will not go hungry. And so, a meal is ready and taking shape. Now, the table must be set. Let's take a look at how the dining table is laid out. This is different from our customs. There are no forks. In England at that time, forks for eating were almost unheard of. This foreign and fussy little thing had not yet been put into use. People eat using spoons, knives, and the clean fingers that God gave them. Every adult probably carries their own knife on them and brings it to the dining table. There are spoons made of wood, horn, or pewter used for drinking pottage and broth. Moreover, what is often used in place of plates is bread. Originally, it was called a trencher. That was a thick slice of coarse bread, slightly stale, laid in front of each diner. The food is served right on top of it. The bread absorbs the juices of the meal, and a hungry diner, in the end, might also eat up this piece of trencher bread. Or, if this household is kind-hearted, these trenchers, soaked with meat juices, will be collected. In a wealthy family, besides the bread trenchers, they will also use plates made of wood or shiny pewter. But the ancient bread trencher is the true root of this custom, and this is also the reason why today we still call a person with a big appetite a good trencherman. On the dining table, there is one item whose status is higher than all other things, and that is salt. Salt is very precious. It is kept in an exquisite container, a salt cellar, and placed in a prominent position on the dining table. The position where a person sits in relation to the salt cellar has a meaning that everyone understands. Sitting above the salt, which means near the head of the table, signifies holding a position of honor. Sitting below the salt then means being in a lower position. In a grand hall set with a long table where people of all classes are sitting, this is a very important matter. But in a small house like this one, this layer of meaning is much milder. However, the salt cellar still sits in its rightful place, and salt remains something that cannot be wasted. Now, the whole family is gathered together. In a household like this, when eating dinner, everyone will sit together. The master of the house and his wife, the children, the servant, and the apprentice all come to the exact same dining table. They will not eat separately. There will not be a situation where the family eats here and the helpers eat over there. They belong to the same household, and a household must act like a single unit, sharing their meals together under the master's roof and at the master's dining table. This is an ancient rule, and even though rank and status are clearly defined, this way of doing things actually brings everyone closer together. And so they finish their morning's work and walk in. Robert leaves the cooling metal behind in the workshop. Will puts down his tools and washes the dirt off his hands. Alice closes the shop for dinner time, pulls up the counter, and brings the little ones inside. Bess takes that heavy pot down from the hook and carries it to the table. And Jane is assigned to go get the spoons. Before reaching out to get the food, they must first say grace before the meal. In almost every single household, giving thanks before a meal is an uninterrupted custom. Beside the steaming hot dining table, everyone bows their heads in silence for a moment and says a few plain and familiar words of prayer which seem extremely well practiced from daily use, giving thanks for the food provided and praying for blessings upon this household. Only when that is done do they begin to dig in and eat heartily. The children are taught table manners at this dining table, just as they are at every single meal. They must wait for the grace to end before the meal. They must take the food nearest to them and not reach across others to get food. When eating meat, they must be neither greedy nor noisy. These are rules learned from childhood, taught meal after meal, until they become their second nature. A well-brought-up child can be spotted right from their behavior at the dining table. It is just as obvious here as in any other setting. This is a plain and delicious meal. The thick hot soup is ladled over the bread. The fresh bread is broken apart and shared. The ale cups are filled up and passed around. Here, there is no grand banquet. There are no dazzling arrays of dishes, and there are no rich and clever culinary tricks. There is enough food, it is very warm, and moreover, everyone shares it together. The older children, along with the little ones, eat in big mouthfuls with that special hearty appetite, unique to children. The men devour their food with the hunger that comes after a whole morning of hard work. The voices of conversation are low and relaxed, just family members chatting idly at the dining table. This moment, even though it could not be more ordinary, is worth our pausing to look. Our understanding of the past, to a large extent, is all about kings and wars, those grand and spectacular events. But what is presented here is another kind of history. It has filled more time for more people, that is, a pot on the fire, a piece of bread on the dining table, and a family gathered together, waiting for a full meal. This is happening in every household, every single day, yet it has almost never been recorded down. However, in its own quiet way, it makes up the very essence of survival. When this meal is finished, the pot is not completely emptied out. There is still some food left inside, shifted away to avoid the fiercest part of the fire, kept for later use, left for anyone who wants a bite to eat before nightfall. A good pot is rarely left to go cold and empty. Day after day, people add ingredients to it, maintaining it. It is the heart in the kitchen that burns brightly without ever going out. In this kitchen, there are also signs of the changing seasons. It is autumn now, and a careful household has already started making plans for the winter. In the cooler corners, people are stockpiling supplies for the winter. Some things are salted and stored away. Some things are dried and hung up. So during the dark days of the year, this family will not go hungry and cold. We do not need to detail all of this. Just seeing those earthen jars and the hanging clusters of food is enough. A wise household, just like a clever squirrel, will fill up its own storeroom when it has the ability to do so. Now, this meal is over, and the warmth still lingers. The dining table is cleared clean. The trenchers are taken away, and the spoons are wiped clean. The fire returns to a much steadier glow. The family members stand up and turn around once again to greet the afternoon hours, each going off to busy themselves with their own livelihoods. And the kitchen will remain warm for quite some time, filled with the wonderful aroma given off by the food that was cooked and eaten. This brief daylight begins little by little to tilt towards its dusk. Having cleared away the cups and plates from dinner, the afternoon hours become free and leisurely. In a decently fed household, at this time, there is exactly one thing that needs to be done, which is also the only thing that needs to be done in the afternoon. That is, to make a trip to the small market. Whether it is today or tomorrow, the old and young of the family always have to eat. And so, Alice picks up her basket, wraps her cloak tightly to ward off the chill, takes a step, and heads out onto the street. This is an ancient custom, buying the daily necessities for the next day, is the work of women. Day after day, the housewives and maids in the city go out carrying their baskets and pack them completely full. Which stall is good? Which stall owner is honest? What counts as the market price? In their hearts, they all have a clear account. It is exactly them, basket by basket, who feed every single household in the world. For a woman, going to the street market is just like lighting the fire and putting the pot on. It is an indispensable part in daily life. Many women's understanding of this city comes not so much through anything else, but rather through the large and small markets here. So, let us step into this noisy afternoon along with her. The tranquility of the early morning has long since completely vanished. At this time, the streets are crowded with people, filled with noise and clamour, and the entire city is bustling vigorously. Carriages rumble past, their wheels grinding out heavy sounds on the stone-paved roads. Hoofbeats clatter. Shouts and answering calls rise and fall one after another. Compared to the warm quietness in the kitchen, this place is completely another world. Have you ever had this kind of experience, stepping suddenly from a quiet room into a crowded street, and in an instant, the noise of the whole street hits you right in the face? Right now, what comes rushing forward is exactly this feeling. However, she has long been used to it. In the middle of the road lies an open kennel, which is an open-air sewer, and pedestrians all know to walk around it. The houses overhead are packed very closely together. The upper floors jut out toward the center of the street, causing the sky, at a very high point, to shrink into a bright and dazzling narrow strip. There are people all around, all rushing about on their respective errands, and she weaves through the flow of people with a basket over her arm, her steps steady and sure. On a street like this, walking requires know-how and is an art. The side, closer to the wall, is the better way to walk, as it can avoid the open kennel, and also save you from being splashed all over with muddy water by passing carriages. Anyone with a bit of status will always try their best to walk near the wall. A careful woman will guard her basket tightly and hold her purse even more securely. A crowd breeds thieving hands, and for a cut purse, the congestion is an accomplice. His sharp and swift blade only needs a single breath of time to separate a person's purse from its owner. When walking, you have to watch your feet clearly, as the road surface is not exactly clean. At the same time, you must also pay attention to the rules, yielding to those who should be yielded to, taking the wall side when you should, and giving up the wall side when you should. The street is a miniature society, with its own set of rules, and all of this Alice knows, inside and out. The road under her feet leads straight to the core trading area of this city. In this city, the grandest market street is none other than Cheapside. This name itself reveals its background. In the old language, cheap simply means market. Cheapside, when set against the surrounding narrow alleys, appears exceptionally wide, a broad avenue cutting straight through the center of the city. Along the street open the most elegant shops in the city, among them led by the goldsmith shops, where the gold and silver vessels and rings displayed in the windows sparkle brightly. The royal processions of the past and grand parades all passed mightily through Cheapside. It is the main street of the entire city, and right now it is packed so tightly that not a drop of water could trickle through. Around this street, the distribution of various trades is just like a city map, written directly into the street names. There is Bread Street, which is where the bakers used to gather and live. There is Milk Street, and also Poultry, which is the place to sell chickens, ducks, geese and birds. There is also Honey Lane, and so on and so forth, too many to list. Every single one was named a very long time ago, based on the trade of those days. A stranger from out of town, even if they only look at the street signs, can almost find the right place to get a meal. The city grew up bit by bit, along with the development of the trades. Every profession has its own territory, and the ancient street names carry this very memory. Before buying food, one usually has to arrange the matter of water first. Besides her basket, Alice also brought along a vessel for holding water. To fill it up, she walks toward the liveliest place in the city, the Great Conduit. This Great Conduit on Cheapside can be called a marvel among facilities of its kind. It is a huge, stone-built cistern. The clear water in the pool, crisp and crystal clear, is brought over from a spring very far outside the city. The sweet spring water journeys all the way through lead pipes and is transported into the city. The common people in the city draw clean water from the spouts, which is quite a significant blessing in a densely populated place. The area around the conduit is always bustling with activity. It is one of the places where the flow of people in the entire city seems bound to intersect. Look at the crowd gathered all around. Servants and housewives carrying jugs and pots, lining up and waiting at the spouts. For their turn, there are also water bearers who make a living specifically by selling water, both men and women, all solidly built, carrying on their backs large wooden buckets packed completely full and nearly overflowing. They go in and out of the streets, alleys, and stairwells all day long. Beside the conduit, what flows is not only clear water, but also endless gossip. This place is an excellent spot to ask for news and spread what you have seen and heard. Before carrying their heavy loads and climbing the hill to go home, resting their feet and chatting is just right, with neighbours for company. Alice fills her water jug, sets it aside, and only then turns to the main business, beginning to buy food. The market, as always, occupies the crossroads and the open spaces of the streets. Before her eyes is a dazzling and joyously festive scene of buying and selling. Here, the countryside blends into the city. Country folk walk over from the surrounding fields and villages, their baskets and carts filled with goods they want to sell. There are old women selling herbs, holding bundles of fresh green, parsley, sage, and sweet herbs, as well as onions strung in rows. There are women who stack butter, cheese, and freshly laid eggs on clean cloths, displaying them for sale. Baskets upon baskets of apples and pears are piled up in alternating red and yellow, looking extremely beautiful. After all, right now, it is already autumn. There are fishmongers guarding their bright white catches, straining their throats to attract customers. There is also a man holding a tray of steaming hot meat pies, and that aroma drills straight into people's noses in the cold air, enticing people and warming their hearts. The market is painted with the colours belonging to this season. Right at the turn of Michaelmas, the products of the golden autumn are piled up everywhere. Baskets upon baskets of nuts, the very last batch of fruits this year, and root vegetables saved for stewing in the winter soup pots. There are even countless fat geese, all fattened up in the harvested stubble fields after the autumn harvest. Goose is the absolutely essential main dish for Michaelmas, and all over the country, no banquet on this day can do without it. In the market during this season, the sounds of geese honking rise and fall one after another. Whether it is a housewife planning to throw a feast, or just a household wanting to eat a rewarding meal, everyone knows that this time is exactly the good moment to buy a goose. Echoing above all of this is the grandest movement of the market, the cries of the vendors. Every seller has a set of words, singing and reciting them over and over again to draw buyers to the front of their own stalls. Have you ever heard the scene of the entire market shouting in unison? That is a strange and rugged song, with absolutely no rules to speak of. This cry of a vendor, clashing together with that shout. Buy apples, sweet and ripe apples. Hot pies, fresh out of the oven. Lavender, who wants to buy sweet lavender? Collecting junk, bring your old shoes and torn clothes to sell. The street cries of the city are famous, blending into a rough chorus of 100 voices, echoing continuously, from early morning all the way until dark. Take another look at those people doing business. Not only are the ones buying things women, but the ones selling things are also mostly women. The ones selling herbs, the ones selling fish, the ones selling milk, the ones selling apples. There are also those setting out their own eggs and cheese. Everyone is relying on this to make a living. For those women from poor families and widows who have no other family to rely on, occupying a stall in the market is exactly where their livelihood lies. She can buy a meager amount of goods wholesale and resell them to earn a little bit of price difference. She can bring out her own handiwork and the eggs laid by her own chickens to sell. This work is both bitter and cold, and what is earned is no more than a few scattered coins. But this money is earned by her own self. Who knows how many women relied on exactly this to raise their children and support themselves. They toil away under the watchful eyes of the public in this bright and open market, yet have never been recorded in the annals of history. Next is the stage of picking and choosing and haggling over prices, and this is exactly the time that tests a good housewife's ability to manage a home. Alice weaves through stall after stall with a shrewd look on her face. She squeezes the apples to see if they are crisp and smells the fresh fish to see if they are clear. She remembers the prices from last week and the prices from this week and can see at a single glance which vendor is asking an outrageous price. Here, the ancient drama of bargaining is equally being staged, just like what happens in front of her own counter. The other party states a price, this side counters with a lower price, and finally they compromise and close the deal. 1 penny matters, and a halfpenny also matters. A calculating and thrifty housewife must count every single coin clearly. Getting by in life relies entirely on these copper coins. There is also one more thing that dictates what goes into the basket, and that is the calendar of the church. In everyday life, you simply cannot eat meat every day. On Fridays, and on other designated days throughout the year, meat must be abstained from, and you must switch to eating fish. This is an old rule passed down because of faith. During these years, it has at the same time also become the law. The royal court hopes to use this to keep the fishermen and fishing fleets employed and maintain their strength. A smart housewife remembers the days in her heart. She knows clearly which days meat should be set on the table and which days fish must be seen. Whenever there is a day for eating fish, the market always has a response. Herring, salted cod, and everything fished up from the rivers, lakes, and seas have everything that should be there. Alice buys food according to the day after day, and inside her head she carries both the market prices and this calendar. To ensure fair trade, the market also has its own laws and regulations. The so-called open market means exactly that. Everyone can buy things at the exact same fair price. Merchants with crooked ideas will commit a crime if they are not careful. The act of intercepting and buying up goods halfway before they even enter the market in an attempt to monopolize them is called forestalling, and this is strictly prohibited. The act of buying low and turning around to sell high for a profit in the exact same market is called regrating, and this is also a kind of offence. Steelyards and measuring tools must all be verified against the official standards, and no one should even think about scamming people by giving short weight. This daily buying and selling has people keeping an eye on it to prevent poor families from being left to the mercy of others when it comes to the vital matter of their daily rations. Right when she is in the midst of this bustling energy and has filled her basket most of the way, a familiar voice calls her name. It is a neighbour, someone she has known for many years, who is also out running the exact same errand. Her name is Goodwife Marlowe, and she lives just a few doors down. The moment the two women meet, they naturally draw close together, as old neighbours always do. This is exactly a part of market life that is just as important as buying food. The market is a place where women from the same parish gather, chat, and maintain the warmth of the neighbourhood. The two of them stand between the stalls, exchanging the private talk of every household, whose master of the house has fallen ill and whose master of the house is getting better, whose child is going to have a wedding, how the price of wheat has risen and fallen, and whether people will freeze this winter. These trivial yet monumental pieces of news in the lives of ordinary people spread out, basket by basket, from woman to woman. This matter is worth our taking a clear look at. It is a very real power, nourishing things silently. The women of a place know each other well and see through everything. They are the keepers of news, the watchers of every rustle of the wind and grass in the neighbourhood, and that net that stitches the neighbours together. People call this group of women gossips, and in that era, the meaning of this word was actually very close and very tender. Whenever a woman encountered a difficulty, the first ones she sought out were always her other sisters. The birth of a new life, a sickness, a funeral, a wedding are all affairs managed by women, carefully tended to by the silent community made up of neighbours. And much of the affection within this is quietly woven together in this marketplace chit-chat week after week. And so, the two friends chat for quite a while in this cold and bright afternoon, letting the flow of people brush past their shoulders. This chatting is not rushed, but the baskets in their hands are not idle either, picking an apple here and throwing in a sentence there. Labour and friendship are needed together in this moment, and the greater part of a woman's life is exactly woven together like this. The sky begins to darken. The sun sets early nowadays, and the moment the sun dips behind the roofs, the chill suddenly becomes heavier. There is still a pile of chores at home, waiting for people to do them. The fire needs watching, and supper needs to be arranged. So, the two women finally say goodbye, agree to see each other tomorrow, and then each turns around, stepping onto the road home. Alice's basket is now heavy. The water has been drawn, and the errands are all settled. She weaves through the gradually thinning crowd, walking back. The street is much quieter than before, and the peddlers begin to pack up their unsold wares. Those high-pitched shouts are now falling silent one by one. The market that gathered in the early morning disperses again when evening arrives. Every day is like this, and tomorrow will be the same. Just imagine, as she walks along, how much of the inner workings of this city she carries in her head. Stalls and prices, faces and names. The fair money for an apple, and the path home through the sea of people, and the domestic gossip of more than half the parish are all gathered up and brought back by her. None of these things have ever had a single word written into any book, but it is knowledge, both real and profound. It is exactly by relying on this knowledge that a city is able to be fed day by day, and a neighbourhood is able to stick together without scattering day by day. And women, using their baskets and their heads, hold on to this knowledge and walk through every single market afternoon in the world. She finally walks out of the noise and turns back into her own quieter alley. The sign of the Pewter Gauntlet Tavern sways quietly in the dim twilight. The moment she catches sight of her door, her footsteps cannot help but become a bit lighter. Behind her, the grand market is sinking into the quietness of the night. Before her eyes is the door to her home, and inside the door is the warmth of a blazing fire, as well as the very last stretch of the day, a peaceful time, that is waiting to be spent quietly. The daylight hours have already closed up, and the night has overwhelmingly enveloped the whole city. In the alleys outside, it's pitch black and freezing cold. The window shutters facing the street have all been tightly closed, shutting the chill out of the doors. Inside the house, the whole family is gathered around the fire. The shop has closed up for the day, and the street has been handed over to the night. The old and the young of the family, just like all the families in the world passing the years, on this night, at the turn of the year, gather around the fireplace, within that small circle of warmth and light. This is the quietest moment in the house, and in some hidden sense, it's also the most precious moment. The chores of the daytime have mostly died down, and all that is left is the much gentler labour after nightfall. That is, the kind of work where you can sit down quietly, close to the fire, and pull the children close to your side. And so, everyone settles into their own spots, in the warm glow of the fire. Have you ever, when a long day is about to end, sat quietly by a fire like this? Have you ever, in this soft and flickering play of light and shadow, sat close and murmured with the ones you love? The scene before our eyes is exactly like this. The fire is the main light in the room, casting warm and shifting halos on people's faces and on the walls. By the fire, a single lonely candle is held up, or a rushlight stuck in a holder, providing a touch of steadier light for the detailed work in their hands. In those years, light was a precious thing, and not a single bit could be wasted. A fine quality beeswax candle was to be saved and only lit at crucial moments. As for an ordinary night, a crude rushlight and a hearth fire were quite enough. This light alone holds its own secrets. The candles used for everyday life were made of tallow, which is rendered animal fat, and when lit, the flame was dim with curling black smoke, and it also carried a pungent, burnt stench. Elegant candles, on the other hand, were made of beeswax, and when burned, they're both clean and bright, and carry a sweet fragrance. It's just that the price was high, and thrifty housekeepers could never bear to use them. Some families would make candles by rendering fat themselves, taking a wick and dipping it time and time again into the warm grease until it built up thick enough to burn for a long time. There were also families who would go buy them from the chandler, and the chandler made a living exactly by doing this. But no matter how the room was lit up, light was always an expense. A careful woman would always try her best to work by the light of the fire, which cost no extra money. Right in this firelight, the women's hands were never idle for a single moment. The very last piece of work, when the day is about to end, 9 times out of 10, is needlework. In those years, a needle and thread almost never left a woman's hands for too long. Sewing was a woman's greatest virtue and craft, learned from a young age and never put down throughout her life, and in the eyes of the world, it was the skill a woman ought to master most. Let's take a look at what is dancing under the tip of that needle. It's mostly just some incredibly ordinary, yet completely endless rough work. For a household, the clothes they wear and the bedding they use all have to be sewn stitch by stitch. After being sewn, they still have to be mended and patched, enduring the years, to make them last for a long time. Their close-fitting shirts and bodices to be stitched together, and their sheets, napkins, coifs, and women's caps to be hemmed. There are also those damages that can never be completely mended: the torn seams, the worn-through elbows, and the fallen hems. Fabric is a precious thing, and clothing is even more valuable. As long as a needle and thread can still save it, there's absolutely no reason to throw a good item away. A piece of clothing is mended again and again, turned inside out and altered, passed down from the oldest child to the second oldest, until it finally loses its shape entirely, and only then is it cut into pieces to be used as rags. And so a woman just sews and sews like this, and this work never truly has a time when it's completely finished. It's just set aside temporarily, because night has fallen, and early tomorrow morning she'll have to thread the needle all over again. The linens and bedding, saved up by a household, can also be considered a substantial family asset. A chest, fully stocked with sheets, shirts, bodices and napkins, is worth real gold and silver and has always been treated as a treasure. They are folded neatly and placed inside a linen press or a camphor wood chest, counted piece by piece and carefully looked after. And when the owner passes away, their destinations will even be clearly written out one by one in the will. A young girl, before getting married, will begin to save up exactly this kind of dowry. Sheets and bedding are prepared early on, just waiting for the day she sets up her own household. Acquiring the linens and needlework for a family is a quiet, steady stream of effort that stretches on for many years. And keeping them neat, clean and completely intact is where the confidence of a well-to-do household lies. Beyond the rough work, if someone has free time and clever hands, they'll also do some finer work. That's embroidery, fancy needlework, which is a craft rather than just labor. It's on this that a woman can truly show what kind of cleverness her two hands can create. Their cushions, coifs and collars, embroidered with multicolored silk threads. There's blackwork, which was all the rage at the time, meaning elegant patterns formed by drawing fine black lines on white linen. And if it's a wealthy household, there's even the extravagance coiled out in gold thread. A woman who is skilled at embroidery truly possesses a stunning talent, making people envy and value her. She might pass away the long and silent nights over several years, stitch by stitch, unhurriedly, bringing a flawlessly beautiful object to life in this world. Besides this, there's another, much plainer, yet also absolutely essential needlework skill for every woman, leaving marks on her own bedding and linens. On every item, the first letters of a name must be embroidered with coloured thread, 2 or 3 neat and clean cross-stitched letters to claim ownership. In a world where washing clothes has to be sent out, or where everyone shares and stores things together, this kind of mark can protect every family's belongings from getting completely mixed up. Besides sewing, knitting is also a craft for passing the time at night. After night falls, sitting around the fire while knitting hats and socks, the stitches make a fine and dense rustling sound in the firelight, and as they casually chat about daily life, the conversation begins to flow. However, the livelihood of weaving has a history even longer and deeper than sewing clothes, and the work involved in this also mostly fell onto the shoulders of women. Before there's fabric to cut and sew, there must first be thread. Spinning thread is the most ancient one of all women's crafts. It's so ancient that it's perfectly integrated with women, to the point that the vocabulary in the English language has even remembered it. An unmarried woman was called a spinster, and spinning thread is exactly the chore that the unmarried daughters in the house were supposed to manage. Just imagine that even more ancient scene of spinning thread with a spindle in the hand and a distaff held against the chest. A bundle of wool or flax is wound onto the distaff, and the distaff is tucked into the belt or pinned under the armpit. The fingers pull the fibres out from the small bundle, twisting and rubbing them, and that spindle, weighed down by a heavy object, begins to spin, twisting the fluff into a tightly stretched thread. A woman can walk, watch the pot, or look after the children at the same time, while her hands can just keep on spinning thread, all on their own. Later on, the newly invented spinning wheel did the exact same work, but much faster. The wheel spins endlessly, and she just focuses on feeding the wool into it. But no matter which method is used, the long and toilsome task of turning a pile of raw wool into a spool of long thread is entirely women's business. Under the sky, in almost every single household, this work was maintained exactly like this, night after night and year after year. The clothes and linens of the world begin in the hands of women and also find their end in the hands of women. From raw wool to torn rags, it's spun and woven, cut, sewn, and mended. This is a long and uninterrupted labor, and it's almost entirely shouldered by them alone. And there's the little one, learning by watching on the side. Jane sits beside her mother, and this night is exactly her schoolroom. A girl learning needlework is just like learning to speak, constantly seeing and hearing it beside her mother from a young age, practicing while figuring it out. This knowledge carries the weight of a girl's entire life and is no less important than any major event. For a woman, mastering needlework is absolutely not some plaything for passing the time. It's the mark of her own worth, and when the world judges a girl on how well she was brought up, looking at this is even more important than seeing whether she can read or not. She's currently embroidering a sampler. This sampler is a piece of fabric for a girl to practice her hands on, and it's also an extremely beautiful object. On it, she lays down the newly learned stitches row by row, which is both a record and a practice. On the fabric, there will be an alphabet embroidered in coloured thread. There will be borders and patterns, and perhaps there will also be a poem, her name, or the year of that time. A girl will keep this sampler safely put away, and in the future constantly add to it, and it will become a living dictionary regarding her lifelong needlework skills. Being able to finish embroidering a fine sampler is an incredible achievement, and it's also clear proof that she possesses a good set of skills that she can benefit from for her entire life. The mother watches her daughter's slender little hands from the side, giving guidance along the way, teaching one stitch, trying one stitch, picking it out if it's wrong, and trying one stitch again. Tonight, there's no punishment, only a craft, being passed down between two generations, unhurriedly and calmly. The older generation passes it to the younger, mothers pass it to daughters, and who knows how many years it has been passed down. At this very moment, right beside this fireplace, inside this small circle of bright shining light, it's being passed down exactly like this. In this beautiful time of the long night, what is passed between mother and daughter is far more than just stitches. When the mother and daughter work together, the girl learns so much knowledge. She learns how to manage the daily necessities of a household and how to keep the old and young of the family in harmony. She learns patience, carefulness, and the grounded feeling of being used to having work in her hands. Watching from the side, she completely learns this great knowledge of how to be a good housewife in a home. There's no sampler that can teach these things, but every single night, just like tonight, is teaching her silently and gently. In the face of all the trivialities and bumps that a woman will face in her life, a mother is a daughter's longest-serving and most deeply affectionate teacher for her enlightenment. However, the night is not all about labour either. For the little ones, this is the hour to listen to stories. Ned is still too small to hold a needle and thread, so he sits on the hearth, playing with his own toys, his top, his red coral amulet, and his hobby horse. While the adults keep their hands busy, pairs of lips also begin to tell tales of the past. In the years when there was nothing else to fill up this long, cold night, this was exactly how everyone passed the time. Beside the fireplace after dark is originally the place where stories are born, and how fascinating those stories are. They're ancient legends passed down by word of mouth, from generation to generation, completely familiar to everyone, yet never having a single word written down in any book. They're nursery rhymes, and they're riddles that make the children scratch their heads in deep thought. They're also those half-true, half-false strange tales from the countryside, talking about the little fairies in the woods and the hearth spirits, and house elves at home. In the legends, there's also the brownie. As long as you treat it kindly, it'll secretly finish all the household chores in the night. At this hour, stories are certainly not used to scare people. What is told are all gentle stories with happy endings, to let the children fall asleep peacefully and comfortably. They're also songs, which are ancient lullabies sung softly towards the cradle. That gentle tune has coaxed who knows how many generations of innocent children to sleep over the centuries. Mixed in together with the stories are also proverbs in plain language, which capture the worldly wisdom of the common people in just a few short words. They're weather proverbs for looking at the sky, saving proverbs for saving money, and going about life. Almost everything encountered has a set phrase waiting behind it. The adults don't need to deliberately teach them at all. They only need to casually let a few lines slip out during idle chat, and they can take root in the children's memories, never to be forgotten for a lifetime. The children, sitting by the fire, swallow down much more than just stories. What comes along with it is an entire treasure chest of everyday wisdom, which is the complete vision and mindset saved up by those who lived through this life before them. It's just like those stories, passed down from generation to generation in this pitch-black night, by this fire, through speaking mouths and listening ears. This matter is worth our remembering firmly, because modern people can easily lose it completely. In the vast majority of households, these stories and songs never turned into words on paper. They only live within the telling, every single night, beside the fireplace, told by the elders to the younger ones. A whole vast world of stories, nursery rhymes and songs relies exactly on this method, passed down through generations by memory alone. And the greater part of this was carried on the shoulders of women, those humming and storytelling mothers, grandmothers, and wet nurses. This is a treasure that no one ever thought to call property. Yet it was given completely without reservation to every single child in the firelight. The men in the house also have their own pastimes after night falls. Robert can sit by the fire and rest his hands that have been tired out from a whole day, or look over the small accounts of the shop, or perhaps tidy up his tools for tomorrow morning's business. The apprentice Will is now finally freed from his daytime errands and chores and can whittle a wood carving, take a nap, or listen to the stories along with the children. And in some households where people can read, at night, there will also be the program of reading out loud. As the number of people who can read grows day by day, reading a book by the fire has become a fresh and elegant nighttime activity. The people who can read will read the words in the books out loud to the people who cannot read, reading a paragraph of a story, reading a chapter of hymns, or anything printed with words that can be found in the house. And so, in those years of transition between the old and the new, the old world of passing things down by word of mouth and the new world of reading and literacy sat side by side, beside the exact same hearth. The night deepens unhurriedly, just like this. The children begin to yawn early on. Ned stares at the toys in his hands, his eyelids fighting each other, and his head begins to droop down like a little chicken pecking at rice. The stitches in Jane's hands slow down, and she neatly folds and puts away her sampler, leaving it for tomorrow morning. Perhaps they also eat a simple night meal, with no great meat or fish, just some bread, cheese, and a little ale left over from the day. The grandest meal was eaten at noon, and after night falls, the body just wants a bite to tide it over. As the hands of the clock walk into the deep night, the thoughts of the whole family all rush towards their beds. They're still the last few trivial matters right before going to sleep every day. The children have to be settled down to sleep, their little faces wiped clean, and a prayer recited. A prayer can bring this day to a close, just like saying grace can start off a meal. Reciting a few thoroughly familiar words, praying to heaven to bless this house and the old and young inside, to pass through this long dark night peacefully and safely. The little ones are picked up or led upstairs and crawl into their respective beds, their bodies nice and warm, their eyes sleepy, and their hearts feeling extremely secure. In the freezing cold days of winter, before going to bed to rest, the beds often have to be warmed up first. Taking a copper warming pan with a long handle and a lid, filled with red-hot glowing coals, and sliding it back and forth a few times inside the freezing cold sheets and bedding, drawing out that gloomy and cold chill inside. This is a touch of thoughtfulness in the winter, and slipping right into a bed that has already been warmed up nice and hot is truly something that makes a person feel comfortable. Finally, it's time to tend to this fire, which is the grand finale among all the chores, letting those flames die down on their own, turning into a pile of coals. Then gathering the coals together and covering them flat with a layer of hearth ash on top, pressing them down safely and banking them well, so that the warm heat can keep watch quietly in the night, keeping watch all the way until the early morning. This is the final song of every day, and settling this fire is just like a person breathing out their final breath before closing their eyes to sleep. It could not be more natural. The candle is held up to lead the way upstairs, and that small flame flickers and then steadies itself again. Room by room, this house shuts its heavy doors in the night. At the very end, in the upstairs bedroom, a pinch of the fingers snuffs out the wick, or perhaps the candle is left to burn out its fat, gradually extinguishing. The darkness gently and tightly floods in, and this house that was startled awake from the cold so early in the morning now finally hands itself over to dreamland. Before leaving, think about it. Just how many scenes were truly carried within this extremely ordinary day? A hearth fire awakened in the pitch black of the night. Children fed full and raised to grow up. The watched-over shop and the trades being made. A meal cooked well and eaten together. A trip run to the market, the neighbours encountered, and a basket packed full. There's also a night fully written with labour and stories, illuminated by the firelight. Any single event, or any single second among these, does not qualify to be written into history. There's no history book that will record down a single stroke, saying that on this day, in a certain month of a certain year, Alice got out of bed, managed the household chores, sold goods, bought food, sewed clothes, and went to sleep. But this is exactly her life, and it's also the life of hundreds and thousands of women just like her. It was lived through solidly day after day, bringing along all the trivial toil and all the love that nourishes things silently. This is exactly those lives that were hidden away for a lifetime, those lives that did not leave behind even half a monument. They were spent in the firelight and the shadows of the candles. They were spent in the kitchen, in the shop, in the nursery, and in the market, and for the women who lived through these days, we probably cannot even call out their names. But even so, those days are still abundant and fulfilling, and are worth being remembered by future generations, even if it has reached today, even if it's done by us. In these years, several centuries later, the coals beneath the hearth ash are faintly glowing with a dim red light. Inside the house, it's dark, quiet, and nice and warm. In ancient London, inside an ordinary household, this extremely ordinary day finally draws its curtain and comes to a rest. And just like that, we leave them, in the darkness and warmth, the whole family, under the exact same roof, sleeping peacefully. The hearth fire keeps its remaining heat low beneath the ashes. The children, in their beds, let out soft sounds of breathing, and that woman, who woke up the earliest and worked the longest, is now also sleeping deeply, just like everyone else, leaving a long and ordinary day behind her. Before you peacefully fall asleep, please spare a touch of gentle thought for her, and also for all the women just like her. Their days were so fulfilling, yet also so unrecorded by others. They lit the fires and fed the children. They managed the shops and walked the streets and alleys to buy food. They did needlework in the firelight until their eyes grew sore. All of this was never written into any books, but all of this is also absolutely essential. This is exactly what ordinary life itself looks like, whether it was in the past or right now. Throughout the long years, millions of women like this have lived, and we can barely call out the names of any single one among them. But they truly and surely existed, and every single one lived through days just about the exact same as this one. With their 2 hands, they silently turned that world, which is exactly the world that has carried us all the way to today. Now, this warmth has returned to you again. The story gently sets you down, sending you back to your own quiet place, sending you back to your own piece of soft night. Tonight, no matter where you lay your head to rest, you are just like that sleeping house, safe and warm. That day you carried on your back has also fallen behind you and can finally be laid down. If some fragment of tonight has left a mark in the bottom of your heart, you are welcome to leave a few words of thought down below at any time. Perhaps it is a tiny detail, or perhaps it is a thought about the women in the faded years within your own family. Knowing that these stories have found listeners in some corner of this world is always something that quietly makes a person happy. There is no rush for this. It can wait until tomorrow morning, or it can never be written at all. This is a channel that tells tranquil history, speaking unhurriedly and calmly, meant to help you sleep. Whenever night falls, we plan to wander through other times and spaces. There are still medieval streets waiting for us to walk, and there are ancient Egyptian halls and ancient Greek ports waiting for us to travel through. Inside there hide hundreds and thousands of ordinary times, and every single one is waiting to be lived through once again on a gentle night. If these journeys can help you sleep peacefully, we warmly welcome you to journey together, walking forward with us along with the slow growth of this channel. Having you here will be a quiet honor. But those are all matters for future nights. As for tonight, there is nothing left that absolutely must be done, and there is no place that absolutely must be gone to. The hearth fire is banked. The house is quiet. The long day has completely and thoroughly come to an end. All right, rest now. Let your breathing slow down, and let this warmth carry you slowly sinking down. You have laid down all your heavy burdens, and besides, right here, there is nothing else you need to seek. Sweet dreams.